Welcome to the Blue Security Podcast, a weekly podcast for information security defenders, where we bring you discussions on best practices, tools, and implementation for enterprise security. Now, here are your hosts for today's show, Andy Jha and Adam Brewer.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Blue Security Podcast. I'm Andy, your host.
I'm Adam, your co-host.
All right, so we have a few good stories to chat about, and I think we're going to have some really good discussion on our second story for sure. But I wanted to start off here talking about some chat apps, because Adam and I, we have done many shows on end-to-end encrypted chat applications like Signal and iMessage. WhatsApp. Yep, exactly. So we've kind of given our opinions on a lot of them, and I came across these stories which kind of piqued my interest because they talked about kind of some vulnerabilities in some of the chat apps. And so starting off, Line is a very popular end-to-end encrypted platform that's used by a lot of users in mostly East Asia, like Japan, Taiwan, Thailand, and Indonesia. I have Line because I have family in Taiwan and Thailand. And so I use Line actually quite a bit to communicate with my family over there. So, and when I saw this, I was like, very interesting. There are two researchers in this article, Thomas Morgensen and Diego de Freitas Aranja. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but anyways, they're going to be presenting at Black Hat Europe on some critical vulnerabilities in Line, including message replay attacks, plain text, and sticker leakage, and then also, most concerning, impersonation attacks. As part of their research, they were able to mount an attacker in the middle attack on iOS devices against the authenticated Line app. And what's another thing to know about Line is considered a super app. So very much like in WeChat in China, where like everything's kind of implemented in the app, Line is done the same way. So like in Japan, it's integrated with like e-government, banking, games, it's got news. So it's not just a chat app. It's like literally everyone spends a lot of time on the app. And if the app were to disappear, that would be a huge issue with like daily life. So what these researchers found is that because of the protocol's stateless design, it enables malicious servers to resend existing encrypted messages at any time in the future, potentially changing the context and the meaning of the communication. So if a user connects to a malicious server, that server can basically keep that message and then resend it at some other time in the future. That may not sound like a lot, but if you resend something, you might be able to get the person receiving that message to question and be like, hey, what are you talking about? Didn't we do this already or something, right? Like you could maybe get them to divulge information because you're changing the context based on the timing of that message. The malicious server can't actually see the contents of the message because, again, it is end-to-end encrypted, but it can replay that ciphertext that, again, based on the timing and the context of the message. Like if I just replay I sent something to Adam, hey Adam, remember that thing that we're working on? And it's like 6 months later, some super secret project, Adam comes back and says, hey, I thought we took care of that already or something like that. Like I could get them to maybe divulge information like that. So that's an issue there. The other thing is the sticker system, which is like as you're typing, let's say like happy, the word happy, it'll come up with like a sticker, which is basically like a giant emoji, and it can replace that with the emoji or the sticker. In order to read that, the typing is sent in plain text to the server. So the server has to be able to read what you're typing and then translate that to a sticker or quote unquote emoji that you can toss in there. Well, that's an issue. And then the URL preview is also an issue because like if you copy a link and you do a preview, you might be able to see sometimes you're tagging on like tokens or passwords or something to the meeting IDs and passwords to the end of that particular link, like a Zoom call. For example, the link might already contain the password to the Zoom call. And so those are also sent in plain text and directly to the server, and the server would be able to see that, the malicious server that is. And then finally, the protocol enables impersonation attacks where any user in the chat, like in a group chat, can then forge a message from other participants and pretend to be them. Now, importantly, as I was looking over this, my first thought was, oh my God, I got to stop using Line, right? Like that's the security person in me. And I got to tell my family they got to stop using Line because there's all this stuff. In reality, you got to be able to, first off, be tricked into connecting to a malicious server. And that would be probably a more targeted attack. If you were more of a high value person, like someone who maybe speaking out against politician, speaking out against the Chinese government, something like that, right? Like then you'd be targeted and you'd have to be tricked into doing that. So for most users, it's probably not a huge deal, but if you're someone who is more high visibility, you might want to switch to, if you're using this for critical communication, switch to something like Signal. I think the most concerning thing was when I was reading through this article that Line had no plans to mitigate this issue, and that this issue also existed partly because they were trying to roll their own crypto. Yeah. And as anyone knows, you should not do that. And so I'm hoping at some point they redesign the app using, like the Signal protocol. There's no reason why they shouldn't use like the open source Signal protocol to redesign it. Like don't roll your own crypto in today's, in the year of our Lord, 2025, we have companies still trying to roll their own crypto. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was the most concerning thing, but the sky's not falling. There's still, I would, in the end, it's still end-to-end encrypted unless you're connecting to this malicious server.
We see this a lot with anything that does URL previews, where there's risks inherent with that through various implementations of it. When you put iOS, for example, in lockdown mode, in that like super secure mode that, again, high value targets should probably be using, it disables URL previews for different reasons, because on iOS, those are fetched on device, but it effectively is a on device fetch of a website that you didn't initiate. It came in through a message and it happened automatically. For most people, there's enough protections built in there, it's fine. But if you're a high value target, there could potentially be buffer overrun, other potential malicious efforts like 0 days that are included in there, and leverage that to kick them off. So URL preview, always challenging. I think regardless of implementation, turning it off if you're a high value target in whatever app you're using is the safest option. The kind of replay here of messages, I mean, to me sounds pretty far-fetched of, well, I could replay a message Andy sent me 6 months ago. I can't change it, but I could just replay it and send it to him again, and it may freak him out and make him just randomly divulge information. Like, okay, that's a little stretch. Impersonation, probably the most concerning here for sure, if you can just act as another user. And there are security benefits to stateless design as well that are part of the challenges they've run into, because it is stateless and you're not doing that confirmation of, here's this message ID, you have received this message, and those sorts of things. That's where those challenges come in with stateless design. So it's a benefit drawback there in circumstances like that, but certainly something to keep an eye on. And I would imagine the default behavior in Line, having never used it, it's not like you get picked of like, oh, what server do you want to connect to? It just connects. So to be compromised and be redirected to a malicious server involves further downstream compromise of other assets around however you're gaining network connectivity. You may have to do DNS poisoning or things like that to redirect you to the malicious server in the first place. So there's more compromise that has to happen to pull these off. So I agree with you. The sky is not falling. Conscientious as always, but other than that, I think for most users, continue to use Line like normal. And hopefully they can learn some takeaways from this. But, ultimately with some of these things, you run into, okay, yes, this is theoretically a risk, but because this risk only comes in after you're already compromised through other means, really limits the blast radius of this attack, because I have to gain these other compromises first, like the ability to poison your DNS, let's say, before I can do this to you. And so that's, again, it makes it in reality very unlikely to be, widely used. So I think your position is correct. High value targets probably should be using Signal already.
Yeah.
And that's still a good piece of advice as always.
And speaking of the Signal protocol, one of the few chat apps that use it is WhatsApp. And so this one also struck me as kind of interesting. So there were some researchers that were able to compile a list of 3.5 billion WhatsApp phone numbers letters, and associated personal information by abusing a contact discovery API that lacked rate limiting protections. Since then, WhatsApp, or the parent company is Meta, has put in rate limit protections. But before this, it was just wide open. And so, I would consider this maybe like a potential 0-day flaw that would be allow users or attackers to enumerate information on potential targets. So here's the details. The researchers at the University of Vienna and SBA Research used WhatsApp's contact discovery feature, which lets you submit a phone number to the platform's Get Device List API endpoint to determine whether a phone number is associated with the account and what devices were used. So without this, obviously, you can abuse it to perform a large scale of enumeration. And so the researchers found that they were able to send a high volume of queries directly to WhatsApp servers, checking more than 1 million numbers per hour. That's crazy. They ran the entire operation from a single university server using just 5 authenticated sessions, initially expecting to get caught by WhatsApp. However, the platform never blocked the accounts. They never throttled their traffic. They never restricted their IP address and never reached out despite all the abusive activity coming from one device. The researchers generated a global set of 63 billion potential mobile numbers and then tested them against the API, and their queries returned 3.5 billion active WhatsApp accounts. A lot of the accounts were identified inside of countries where WhatsApp was banned at the time, including China, Iran, North Korea, and Myanmar. So, I mean, like, you might think, like, who cares? They got accounts of WhatsApp of people, but like, if it's in banned countries, this is something that like the government could use, as wrongdoing against whoever it is. And you're able to identify the people because once they were able to confirm that a phone number was used, the researchers were able to use other API endpoints to enumerate additional information, including the get user info, get prekeys, and fetch picture. So using those, they were able to collect profile photos, about text, and information about other devices associated with a WhatsApp phone number. Because like WhatsApp, you can like link those to your computer, right? And multiple different computers. And so like you're able to capture the information of that. A test of US numbers downloaded 77 million profile photos without any rate limiting, with many showing identifiable faces. And if the about text was available, it also revealed personal data and links to other social accounts. So, when I looked at this, I was like, it's probably not a huge deal, but definitely something to keep in mind when you're putting stuff in, the text boxes and your profile picture. I've actually been using like AI pictures, AI generated pictures of myself for a lot of my profile pictures nowadays for social media and like with chat apps and whatnot. And then I don't really put a whole lot in the about, because like who needs to know stuff? Like, it's not like I'm messaging random people. It's just my friends. So yeah, I mean, like, again, not like the sky is falling, but if you are a high value target and they're able to find your phone number associated with a device, this just stuff that attackers can use against you in the end. So kind of be cognizant of what you're putting out there.
Adam's book recommendation time. Since we're talking about Meta, I highly recommend Careless People, a cautionary tale of power, greed, and the lost idealism by Sarah Wynne Williams. Miss Wynne Williams is a former executive at Meta/Facebook, and she writes a story about her time there and her idealism kind of when she came in, and some just crazy stories along the way. What triggered this in my brain, Andy, is when you said Myanmar, where there's WhatsApp accounts apparently, despite being banned there. Miss Wen Williams made a trip to Myanmar and documented it in the book, and it's stunning. The whole book is just absolute page turner. But I've always had this kind of theory I've worked with where for companies like Google that derive a large portion of their revenue from advertising, and so they're incented to have a good understanding of you to be able to resell that profile to advertisers, that's kind of their secret blend of herbs and spices. That's their original Coca-Cola recipe. And so they're not really interested in sharing it, and they're very buttoned up on security as a result. Meta's secret sauce, and including services like Instagram and WhatsApp, is the social graph. It's the connection points between all the users. So it's truly stunning that they had all of these APIs without any sort of, I mean, the amount of not having rate limiting to this level is insane when they were able to enumerate literally billions of accounts and tens of millions of profile pictures and stuff like that, like no rate limits of any kind is unbelievable. And Meta actually, in their core services, Instagram and Facebook, I have run into their API limits on various occasions in the past. Long story, I won't get into it, but they don't, for them to not have anything here is truly mind boggling. And I think, Andy, we always talk about on this show, what are the takeaways for our listeners and viewers? And API security is something that is starting to get more and more attention. When I was at RSA conference, despite AI being, the number one buzzword, which we're going to get to in a moment, there were plenty of startups doing API security. It's a really hot area right now. And so these are things you need to be interested in and concerned in as you're developing your own software in your own organizations. Is creating APIs is great, but they should absolutely have fundamental security in place, like maybe limit someone to 1 million requests a day or something reasonable. I don't know. I mean, like billions of requests from 5 sessions is insane. This is just crazy.
Yeah.
And again, this is not a sky is falling thing, because this is Meta's secret sauce. And so they are, if they haven't already, I believe you said they have, yes, rate limit protections have been added since. You have a note in there.
Yeah.
This is something they were going to jump on quickly, because this is something that's really core to their business and something they're deeply interested in keeping to themselves. So for the most part, like this risk has been closed, this door has been slammed shut, but this is a learning moment, a teachable moment, as we say, for our listeners and viewers, to make sure that your own APIs are protected and have reasonable limits put in place. Only 2 authenticated sessions, only reasonable limits that would be normal usage, flagging and blocking and alerting on abnormal usage. All of those things should happen at machine speed and scale, and then bring in human intervention as well. Ultimately, super interesting, just kind of unbelievable. But then again, if you go, again, read my book recommendation, that was Careless People by Sarah Wynne Williams. There's a lot of unbelievable in that book. So check it out.
I love how you mentioned API security, because like as soon as you mentioned AI, I was like, wasn't there an AI API that was abused? And I just looked it up real quick, and there was some controversy with DeepSeek, which was that new cheaper Chinese AI model that was supposedly
Generated a Wall Street sell-off. Yeah.
right. It was big, but there was some abuse of the OpenAI API.
Yes. They overly scraped the OpenAI API. They basically and this is what we're starting to see, where like there's new frontier models, and then there's these like trailing edge models that actually use a lot of the training that happens for the frontier models to build these kind of mid-tier models. You're literally piggybacking off of the previous training runs to minimize the amount of training that needs to go into your own model.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. So I'm glad you mentioned API security, because that is definitely something as a takeaway if you're developing APIs or using APIs, something that you need to keep in mind. So kind of transitioning to AI, I saw this article and it really generated some thought. And I'm like, Adam will definitely have some commentary on it. But it's Wall Street Journal. And basically, it starts off by saying Julie Sweet, who is the chief executive of consulting giant Accenture, huge Microsoft partner, by the way, recently delivered some tough news. Accenture is exiting or laying off employees who are not getting the hang of AI at work. So the firm has trained about 70% of roughly its 779,000 employees in generative AI fundamentals. But the employees who require reskilling, she said it's not a viable path in their experience. So that if they can't be trained, they're being shown the door. And then other professional services firms and technology companies, they're also pushing their staffs to learn generative AI and integrate programs like ChatGPT, Gemini, or customize company-specific tools into their work. And interesting enough, I have a friend who works at Google, and I was talking to her recently, and we were talking about AI, and she said, "Yeah, I use AI every day. I'm like 20 times a day. I don't even read my email anymore. I just ask Gemini, like, what are my top 3 things? And in fact, it's part of their performance reviews. Like, how have you used generative AI? What have you done to, improve your efficiency, blah, blah, blah. And so some companies are training people how to use the tools, but then others are leaving them up to figure out how to use them for their own. Some businesses have required training classes or set up help desks to coach employees on how to incorporate AI into their work. And others are putting the onus on staff to think creatively about how to make money or save time with tech. In this article,
And
though,
I want to go back real quick
yeah,
to when you started this with the Accenture Chief Executive Officer, Julie Sweet. You kind of stumbled over this a little bit, so I just want to clarify this point. Miss Sweet was saying for employees for whom reskilling based on our experience is not a viable path. In
mm,
other words, the CEO speak for people who we can't train on AI who won't get it.
yeah,
We're going to show them the door. Is she was saying for people that just don't seem to be able to learn it, can't pick it up.
yeah. Another example, which just floored me in this article, is at this enterprise software company called Ignite Tech. Leaders required staff last year to devote 20% of their work week to experimenting with AI. And they said on one such quote unquote AI Monday, staff brainstormed ways to speed up processes like automating responses to customer service tickets. And then employees had to share on Slack or X what they were learning about AI. And the CEO, Eric Vaughn, said employees self assessed their AI usage. Afterwards, the company used ChatGPT to rank the results. And after a human review, Ignite Tech cut the lowest scoring performers. I mean, like, wow. And then, in the article, it also talked about the guy who brought the AI initiatives to Ignite Tech. And he was kind of like, why are we cutting all these people? He didn't agree with that kind of business decision to just cut people. And then basically they said, well, you either get on board with this or you're gone. And they fired him. So to me, that's like kind of crazy.
Oh, that sounds like a guy who is definitely going for clicks on LinkedIn. Going to write a really cool LinkedIn post about how innovative his company is, and that. I mean, there's part of a performative aspect to this too, where everyone is trying to claim that they're the best at AI.
Sure.
Well, I'll let you continue with your story here, but there's a big performative aspect to this too.
Yeah. So, they're saying that, at workforces, both kind of large and small, there's a lot of workers who are hesitant to adopt AI because part of it is they're fearful that adoption will innovate them out of a job, but they also doubt the technology can do the job as well as they can. So, in a recent Gallup survey, it found that more than 40% of US workers who don't use AI say the main reason is they don't believe it can help with their work. And then a smaller share, 11%, said the primary driver was that they did not want to change how they worked. And then in a job application process at a company called Multiverse, which is an education tech company in London, applicants are asked in the interview how they used AI in their lives. And in one assignment, prospective hires write prompts to complete certain tasks. If the applicants are skeptical of AI, it's picked up in the application process. And the hiring, HR person said, we have to hire for AI will, not just skill, as in like you have to believe in AI and not just
Mhm.
be fluent in it. And they said that LinkedIn job postings require AI literacy skills have expanded by 70% in the last 12 months. And I've seen this, like at Microsoft. Adam and I both work at Microsoft in our field sales. And in some of these surveys and kind of just the leader communication emails that come out, I see this push on like how they'll ask questions like, how can we help you incorporate AI more into your workflow and help you be more efficient? And so I see this push at Microsoft. It's not implemented in our like yearly reviews yet,
Yet.
quote unquote, like,
Although they did just overhaul the annual review process, so seems like if they wanted to stick it in, they would have.
yeah, yeah. I feel like it might be coming next year or something like that. To me, I would say I'm probably more on the skeptical side of like how AI can change like just the regular workforce. On the security side, like the agents I think are phenomenal, right? Like agents being coded, be able to do something specific because like there's a lot of like monotonous work in security, like being able to look up a an IP address if it's malicious or part of a threat, profile, or looking up, different hashes or whatever, right? Like seeing if a URL is malicious, like all that stuff is anonymous and can be done autonomously for a defender. But just as part of like regular AI, I mean, I use Copilot a lot, but it's mainly to just like rewrite stuff or like summarize things. Like I'll stick in like a Learn document or something like that and ask it to like give me like 3 talking points, if I need to summarize something. Or and that's something I feel like AI is really good at, or like rewrite something in a softer tone. Sometimes when you're typing out an email, it's angry, right? And you can have it reword it. But is that helping me a lot? I don't know. I feel like I'm more on the skeptic side.
Well, this is certainly one of those inflection points in history that will obviously change things. Like, way to go out on a limb, Adam. But if you go back and you think of, there was a time when you used to see in every job application, must be fluent in Microsoft Office or proficient. You must know Word, Excel, PowerPoint. That's not even in job applications anymore because it's just assumed skill. You have to have basic literacy in Office applications to work in an office. Just you do. It's an expectation. And that's where this is going to go. And so I kind of laughed when you were kind of talking through the story because you were saying how some people are resistant to it because they're afraid it'll take their jobs. And then there are people who are resistant to it because they say it can't do the job as well as they can. And
Or they don't want to change how they worked.
well, that's a third one, right?
Yeah.
And those people exist before. My whole career got set on the path it's on because someone didn't want to learn the cloud. I got kind of my foot in the door in the whole Microsoft ecosystem was an opportunity at a publicly traded insurance company based in West Des Moines to help manage their Lotus Notes on premises to Microsoft 365, at the time, Office 365 migration. And the previous person who sat in that chair said, I don't want to learn Office 365. I don't want to learn the cloud. And they said, okay, thank you. Here's someone who does.
Mm-hmm.
So a willingness to learn is always a valuable thing. But to me, I see the value, right? We've talked about how in our podcast, it has saved us tremendous amounts of time and I think made the show a better product to where we have really good transcriptions and captions and better editing and tighter editing and a faster pace so you can ingest more of our content without as many pauses or ums or ahs in the conversation. Those are all really positive things. But at the same time, I have used it to do other things and seen it really fall down. And so I'm in this camp on this thing is not taking my job anytime soon. Maybe someday, sure. But in the near term, the differentiator is going to be the people who know how to leverage it versus those who don't. And Andy, to your point, that is leveraging what it does really well. And one of the things these large language models have done well, basically since they came on the scene, is they're really good at generating content based on other content or summarizing and synthesizing information. And that's great. I'm same with you. Sometimes I can be a little too terse in my email communication using the coaching tool in Microsoft 365 Copilot to help soften my tone or maybe help communicate better. I am sure has helped me maybe win a deal or two I wouldn't have because I communicated in a more approachable way. I always use things like to take, say, a blog post announcing a whole bunch of new stuff, like here's all the announcements from Ignite, summarize this, make it in a executive friendly email with 6 bullet points that I can send to my CISO contacts at my customers because I'm a salesperson at Microsoft. Here you go. Like that's allowed me to send out emails summarizing the news from Ignite and then encouraging people to click into the blog to learn more. Again, nobody's setting the world on fire with these use cases, but they've absolutely saved me time. They've absolutely generated really high value content. They've made me better at my job. I love using the schedule with Copilot, where it will generate a meeting invite, it will suggest a subject line, and it writes an agenda, which, by the way, every meeting needs an agenda. I don't care how simple it is, put something in there. It does that for you based on the content of the thread and summarizes the thread, helps everyone jump in the meeting and kind of know why we're here, what we're talking about, what we plan to do. That makes better meetings. So, like, all of these things, are they absolutely changing the world and tipping the earth on its axis? No, but they're all small wins that add up over time. And so skepticism, especially amongst security practitioners, super healthy
Mm.
and probably going to get you to a better place, because the people that I think are over the top on this and are over relying on Copilot, they get a reputation around work on that. There are people where you will talk to and they'll say, well, all she does is just plug everything you ask her into Copilot, and you can tell because the answers are either vague or wrong or whatever. And that's someone who has gone too far off the other end, and they're trying to adopt this, but they're doing it in a way that's ineffective because they don't actually have that AI fluency to understand, hey, being able to ask it any generic question, it may give you the right answer, but it may not. And if you're not fact checking that and you're not putting that in the right context or grounding it, it's going to lead to ineffective results. And you get that reputation of you're just the person who's using AI as a crutch, and it's not actually making you better at your job. So skepticism is healthy, skepticism is good, but I think just like people once had to learn to use computers, then they had to learn to use office applications, and these are all natural evolutions of the workplace, so too is this. This is another tool in the toolbox. And there will be a dividing line between the people who have not just like begrudgingly adopted it, but have enthusiastically adopted it and learned the use cases in which it's effective and which it's not.
Mm.
Those are I think, going to be the winners moving forward. I'm not going to say I've got it all figured out, because to your point, Andy, there is a lot of emphasis at our employer on how are you using this more and more. And this is proliferating. But I think you have to do that in a measured way where you can point to, here is where I am using it, where I'm seeing really effective results, really good results. And here's areas where I'm monitoring and continuing to test and give it another effort over time. I will say having that willingness to explore can be helpful. So let me give an example. I had an account executive I worked with last year who received a RFP. And if you're not in sales or you haven't issued an RFP, they're typically these super long, either PDFs or Excel documents with 300 questions about your product or service that they want answered. Does it do it? Yes or no? What's a description? What's a link to the documentation? They're incredibly time consuming and really difficult to accomplish. And he took one PDF, uploaded it to Copilot, and said, hey, can you fill this out? Only use Microsoft Learn, so docs.microsoft.com, as your authoritative source for this. Consult no other websites but that. And it nailed it. And something that used to take me literally 8, 16, 24 work hours to complete, it completed in 2 minutes, after an effectively written prompt. And I reviewed it. I did human review. I'm like, there's going to be so many hallucinations and so much BS in here. There wasn't, because it was grounded in good data. And that's kind of the key too. And he was really smart to ground it like that. And so when it came back, and I'm like, Mr. Account Executive, this is perfect. Like this is something that used to take me hours of menial, like just the worst, most painful labor to do. And it's done, and it's done right, and it's accurate. And this is something I would be comfortable sending to a customer. That was a revelation, because I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have done that because I wouldn't have trusted it. I am too much of a skeptic sometimes to even just be like, well, let's just see what happens. Let's just throw stuff at the wall. And that's where what that taught me is, even with your healthy skepticism, which is important, you need to keep trying, because the state of the art is evolving so rapidly too. Something that it may have fallen down on a year ago, 6 months ago, it may be able to effectively complete today. And that was kind of mind boggling too. Now, I'm not worried about that taking a solution engineer's job, because we're not paying solution engineers to fill out spreadsheets and copy and paste links to documentation. That's not the value humans bring. That should be something machines can do. And now that machines can do that, that frees up solution engineers to do more human tasks. I'm not saying I don't need SEs anymore. And people posting that are crazy. That's not the case. It's just freeing people up to do more human work. So I'm overall trying to hit that healthy balance.
Yeah, I think same thing like how you said, some coworkers will just plug something into Copilot and then regurgitate that. Like I've seen that as well. And it's like when almost like when people are like, oh, I do my own research, you don't really
Dr. Google said this.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're not a doctor. And so like I've seen, some of my peers, they'll plug in something because like we've lost some knowledge in like some of the legacy stuff. So I've been actually tasked with talking about co-management with the federal government because they're years behind, and so still talking about like mecum and co-management. And so I've had a couple of my peers like plug something into Copilot and then like regurgitate that, and I'm like, you don't even really know what you're actually talking about. You're just regurgitating what Copilot says, and like it's kind of right, but if you don't know what you're actually saying, you're just reading the words, then you don't really understand the technology, right?
And they answer so confidently
Mm-hmm.
that it's really difficult if you aren't fluent in the technology to see where the gaps are, where the errors are. And I mean, that's part of the challenge. Is I use this as an example, and this is years ago, so hopefully it wouldn't happen anymore. But a customer was asking about, they basically wanted like a cloud version of on-premises Active Directory certificate services. And Copilot confidently made up Azure Active Directory certificate services and talked about it and gave bullet points on this service that didn't exist. And it was so confidently delivered. And thankfully, this person did have the sense of, a Copilot says, we've got this thing. They showed it to me. I'm like, that's not real. That doesn't exist. Now, this was years ago.
Yeah.
But that's the other problem, is how confidently these solutions answer. If you're not fluent in it, it's not like hallucinations have big red flashing lights next to them. They're delivered in absolute confidence, like, well, this is the way you do it, or this is the solution. And so that makes it harder too. And that's why expertise still matters, to where when that account executive had it take a pass at doing the RFP, never intending to send it to the customer without significant human review, it got human review by me. And I said, holy smokes, every question's right. This is unbelievable. But you still need that human expertise to validate it. That whole trust but verify thing
Yeah.
is more important than ever. Expertise is not going away. The need for that is not going away anytime soon. And so you really have to see this is an opportunity to make your life easier and better and let you do the more enjoyable parts of work, but not run away from it. I do see a lot of this. I mentioned this as you were going through the story, Andy. Super performative. There's a lot of people going for clout on LinkedIn right now, trying to be the coolest, most AI forward company. And, a lot of these companies, they'll be like, they're 30 employees. And it's like, oh, the CEO laid off 20% of the people because they weren't on board with AI. It's like, oh, so they laid off one person. Okay. Like it sounds better in numbers because they're trying to get their brand out there. They're trying to get their reputation.
And like we're talking like right now, like end of 2025. And AI came out like 2023, it's kind of the boom, and it's leaps and bounds better than what it was, and it's going to be better, next year. It's constantly improving. So, I do see definite value in it. And like what's crazy is I was talking to my kid. I'm listening to this podcast about, I think it's on NPR, about how AI is affecting our education system. Some educators are embracing it, some people are banning it, but I asked my kids, like my 11-year-old, like I'm like, hey, are you using AI? He's like, yeah, I'll ask ChatGPT to summarize, like these notes that my teacher gives me, and so that I have study notes. And I'm like, okay, that's a great use of it,
Yeah, sure.
as long as you're not asking it to like write a paper for you, right? Like I think that's where you kind of draw the line. But
Well, Andy, I think you and I are both, maybe compared to some parents, we're much more lenient with, like, say, screen time. And
Mhm.
I mean, my goodness, we could get into a whole other brand of podcast if we got into that. But it's one of those things where I think you and I both have a similar mindset on this, where, there's certainly areas where there requires parental oversight, and stories of your kids hacking your tools are always hilarious. But this is not going to disappear. And so we need to live in a world where this exists. And how do we use this intelligently and correctly, but also learn self-regulation on when is too much screen time, when's too much technology time, what are correct use cases of LLMs, what are not. And that's awesome to hear that your 11-year-old is using it in a really, I think, productive and fair way. And ultimately continuing to hammer that point on, like, if you don't understand this, you can't review what it says and you can't know if it's right or wrong. And that's not going to make you helpful in the real world. I mean, I kept going back to all these examples where it did save time, but if I didn't have that base knowledge to know it was accurate, then it could embarrass you. And we've all had examples. We have kind of a side chat with our buddies on Signal where we all just cringe, and we'll have coworkers just send untouched LLM output to customers and say things that are just absolutely blatantly false. And it's embarrassing. And I think too, by the way, there was the old site, let me Google that for you, back in the day. It's still around, LMGTFY. And I've made this point before, so I'll get through it. It was insulting on purpose. Like when someone asked you a dumb question, you could let me Google that for you, to kind of make the point of, if you would just take the basic step of type this in the Google search box, you would have gotten the result. And nowadays I see people do this all the time, where someone asks a question and people just send them AI slop in response. It's like, if I wanted to go ask ChatGPT or Copilot that question, I could have. I'm asking for a human answer on purpose. And you see that everywhere. It's not just in work. You see it on like Facebook groups. Like, I'm in a Facebook group for a cruise ship I'm going to be on in a couple of months. And people will ask questions, and someone some smart ass will come in and post like ChatGPT output. And it's just like, well, thanks. That's helpful. I could have done that myself. So that's the other thing too, is be careful with that, as a cautionary tale, because it does like socially come off really poorly.
Yeah. Like you're real smug.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's our show for this week. It was some great conversation. Thanks for listening and watching as always. The links to the articles that we used for our show will be in the show notes, as well as our contact information. If you have any questions or topics you want us to talk about in the future, just reach out to us. Thanks. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the Blue Security Podcast. Please check out the show notes, catch up on episodes you may have missed, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Find Andy on Twitter @AJaw0 and Adam @AJ Brewer. See you at our next episode.